fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly when my heart sings. Lightly I fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly when my heart sings. Cling to the ground every heavy burden. Now I can soar up above the clouds. Cling to the ground every heavy burden. Now I can soar up above the clouds. Lightly I fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly when my heart sings. Lightly I fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly with my heart sings. Cling to the ground every heavy burden. Now I can soar up above the clouds. Cling to the ground every heavy burden. Now I can soar up above the clouds. Lightly I fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly when my heart sings. Lightly I fly when I live in laughter. Lightly I fly when my heart sings. Well, we'd like to welcome all of you to Sunday service. My name is Nayaswami Anandi. This is Nayaswami Bharat. We're especially happy to have so many guests with us today, also over the internet, so welcome to all of you. I'll begin this morning with a reading from Rays of the One Light. This is a book of parallel passages from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita written by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading is entitled First Things First. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. That expression, first things first, is a piece of counsel often given to students of business techniques. It is the advice of practicality to those who aspire to worldly success. But according to the Hermetic doctrine, as above, so below, that which works best in one level of life is often the best guide to what will work best on every other level. If a person is true to his highest priorities, he will generally find that his other needs are fulfilled naturally as well. This is true, certainly, of the search for God. One of the greatest sayings of Jesus Christ was this simple sentence in the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 6. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Paramahansa Yogananda gave his elder brother Ananta a wonderful lesson in this truth. It was Ananta who had captured him and brought him back from his flight to the Himalayas, described by Yogananda in Autobiography of a Yogi. In Yogananda's book, we read how Ananta later challenged him in the city of Agra to pit his divine faith against such practical worldly considerations as the need for earning a living. Fearless before that challenge, the young aspirant agreed to go by train, without any money, to the nearby town of Brindaban, not to miss a single meal in Brindaban, and to find his way back to Agra without begging and without in any other way asking for help. In one of the most thrilling chapters in the book, Yogananda fulfilled all the conditions of the test. Yogananda continued the account. As the tale was unfolded, my brother turned sober, then solemn. The law of demand and supply reaches into subtler realms than I had supposed. Ananta spoke with a spiritual enthusiasm never before noticeable.
I understand for the first time your indifference to the vaults and vulgar accumulations of the world. Late as it was, my brother insisted that he receive Diksha, initiation, into Kriya Yoga. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 9th chapter, those who worship lesser gods go to their gods, but those who worship me come to me. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
I'd like to read from Whispers from Eternity, a book on mystical poetry by Paramahansa Yogananda. O fountain of love, flood the lowlands of our love for home and family with thy omnipresent love. O mighty source of all our rivers of desire, teach us not to cut ourselves off from thee, hunting on the dry sands of sense satisfaction. Love is our soul's birthright. We demand now that all the rivers of our cravings be redirected through valleys of humility, eager self-sacrifice, and the concern for others until, reinforced by thy torrential blessings, they merge in the ocean of all fulfillment in thee. Bless us that the rivulets of our sympathy, affection, love lose not themselves in the sands of dreary selfishness. Let the little lonely, separately moving streamlets of our love, which come through thee, merge at last in the vastness of thy perfect love. Well, the story of Paramahansa Yogananda spending the day in Vrindavan is such a beautiful story of trust. And we see that trust reenacted in the lives of cats all the time. When a mother cat feels like its baby is in an unsafe place, what does she do? She'll grab her kitten behind the neck and very gently, but not too strongly, but just perfectly, she'll grab the kitten. And then what does a kitten do? When it's grabbed, it just goes completely relaxed and doesn't fight the mother. And then she places it off to the side somewhere where she knows is better for the kitten. And I've been reading a lot about the Om vibration, the cosmic vibration, and Paramahansa Yogananda said that the invisible mother has become visible through the mountains and the trees and all of nature. And as I was thinking about that statement, I realized that the Divine Mother has become visible and created a special world for each of her devotees, a world that's perfect for that devotee to evolve and to reclaim itself as spirit once again. And so when Divine Mother puts us somewhere, she's gone to a lot of trouble. It's almost like the hostess of a house has cooked a wonderful meal and set the table very beautiful and put fresh cut flowers on the table and tried to create a wonderful environment. And then a food that has a lot of vitality. Well, Paramahansa Yogananda, actually, pardon me, it was Swami Kriyananda. He said that karma is a blessing, a divine love. And just God creating an environment for us to become free. Swami Kriyananda talked about the spiritual path is like a tight wire. And let's say it goes across the chasm of a gorge. And the way to get across safely on the wire is to be perfectly calm and relaxed and not to wobble and not to go too far to the left or too far to the right. And of course, what is yoga? Yoga is getting rid of the likes and dislikes, not getting too elated, not getting too dejected, but just finding your center in the middle. I looked up this morning on Google advice for tightrope walkers, and and I didn't find any good advice. But I imagine what would be the advice. One was don't get ahead of yourself. Don't look at the very, very end, but to look right in front of you and make each step count. And one thing that I did find was a group of, on a high wire in a zoo in China, a man was going by with a bicycle, and under the bicycle there was a ladder, and of course there was a man on the bicycle, and then there was a man on the ladder, and across the zoo compound there were 6 Siberian tigers. And I think they're at least 8 feet long, probably tail to nose. And so they were going along, and they didn't get the height right. Because they showed the Siberian tiger reaching up and grabbing hold of the ladder, and the guy was scooting up the ladder, and the bicycle guy was tipping like that. And then they had a 3-year-old girl walking along behind, just on her feet with no bicycle. And life, well, we've heard of tamas and rajas and satoguna. Tamas is when you're very lethargic, and you have to be prompted to put out effort, energy. And rajas is where you have a lot of energy, but it's more a sense of you're directing it. It's all up to you. And then sattva is tuning in the divine and letting God flow through you. And we never really can be successful in life by being a perfectly limp kitten and let Divine Mother take us around. It doesn't work that way. And so when we're trying to walk the tightrope of life, we have sometimes 6 Siberian tigers leaping at us. And we just, but that's what makes us stronger, is that when we can just get really centered in ourselves. And why does God want us to trust Him? Well, the important thing, I think, is that He wants us to really see that He's the only reality, and that His reality, omnipresence, is our reality. I had an experience a couple years ago that, as a yogi, we're supposed to be even-minded and cheerful, and that's the best way to overcome karma, and the quickest way to get through karma, because we aren't wobbling on the tightrope, we're just moving more forward. And I just had some sort of health issues and couldn't breathe very well, and Suzanne, our nurse, said, well, does it feel like a gorilla on your chest? And no, just like a bunny, and not that big. But I was having difficulty, and then and it was going to take a while to get the appointment. It was 6 weeks away, and I was really concerned because I was having trouble walking across the living room, and it was a difficult time. And so I circled the date of my appointment on the calendar. And it was like after 3 weeks, I thought, oh, only 3 weeks left, I get to see the pulmonologist. And then, oh, wait, 2 more weeks, I can get some really help, I could solve this. And I was really anticipating this. And so the night before the grand appointment that I'd been marking off, not quite, I wasn't really marking off the calendar, but physically, but mentally I was just really excited. And that night, midnight, I had a really bad bladder attack with blood and real high fever, and that at midnight. And so I spent 7 hours just watching the clock tick like this. And I had to sit in a chair. And so we went, and everything was being taken care of there. And then we went and saw the pulmonologist. And they couldn't help me, and just... so that didn't work out. And then And then we went to the hospital for some tests, and they didn't have the right codes. So I was there for 2 hours just waiting, and my fever had gotten up to 103 then. And and so we just waited for a long time, and nothing happened then. And then we drove home. And and by this time I was really shaking and shivering, and it was still in October, and it was so cold I got under my down comforter and put my down coat on, and Nandi had to come in and kind of get in for warmth. And I was just laughing to myself, thinking it was just such a setup from Divine Mother. Paramahansa Yogananda said that that God is the greatest magician because he makes us think that matter is real, and it's not. It's all vibration. And it was, by that time I was really laughing because it was so absurd, kind of the whole day, and especially I had been looking forward to this big day. Just so much, just, oh boy, I can't wait till this day can come. And life is like that when we just step outside of ourselves, and we really stepped out of the loving care that God is giving us and creating for us. There's a very famous basketball coach that probably most everyone has heard his name, and his name is John Wooten, and he was the coach for UCLA basketball. And he was really a yogi. And in the way that he led his team, one of his players said that the coach, he never talked about winning, ever, but he taught us all on how to win. And how did he do that? He was actually a very successful coach. He won 10 national championships. He had a winning streak one time of 88 games. And one of the main things, he said he loved intensity, but he wanted the emotions to be controlled. And so he just really emphasized that, and he emphasized it in his own being. On the bench, he would sit and he just practiced, just being perfectly relaxed. And if they were ahead, great. Behind, great. You couldn't tell by his emotions. Once the announcer was saying that, Wooden just raised an eyebrow. He must be mad about something. And one of his players, Fred Slaughter, was talking about, they won several national championships during that player's time with UCLA. But he said there were about 5 games where we started out behind 18-2. And we were just getting killed by the other team. And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And he would look over at Coach Wooden, and Coach Wooden had the program rolled up in his hands, was just perfectly calm and relaxed. And he thought, well, if the coach isn't worried, then I shouldn't be worried either. And they said that they won the games. And he said that after a game, there should be no difference in the locker room than if you won or you lost. And he said, of course you can be enthusiastic. He wanted that. He wanted intensity. But he didn't want excess exuberance, because you lose control of yourself and you lose control of your calmness and everything that he taught. And what he emphasized, he said, don't look at the scoreboard, just do what I've told you to do. And in fact, he just measured how well the team was doing by, he had a plan the first day of practice, and then they just taught the team the skills that they needed, and he said, just do the skills that you're taught. And it was like a line going up like this. And that's all that mattered. If we won along the way, if we lost along the way, it didn't matter as long as you were in the moment perfecting the skills. And isn't the spiritual path like this, where Paramahansa Yogananda said that we should be a long-distance runner? And there was one monk who he asked to dig a hole, and he's just started digging, and hours later he was still there digging. And then finally he was done. And Yogananda said that that's the effort that it takes to know God. And it's we don't really know often what the game is. I remember during that time with the lungs, I had emailed Swami Kriyananda, and I said, I hope to be able to get back to doing Kriya. And we sort of define our spiritual practices by how we're doing, how much we do those spiritual practices. And Swami Kriyananda, who has a challenging heart, wrote back and said he hopes to get back to doing Kriya too. And it made me feel so good. It was like all of a sudden I thought the game was a certain game we were playing, and actually it's a much bigger game than that. And so we don't always know what Divine Mother has in mind, where she's placing us. And so this is again where trust is so important to come into. And just as John Wooten, he didn't want the players to be focused on results because they would get out of themselves. It's such an important attitude for karma yoga because we're trying to not get caught up in the results and because we're just trying to give of ourselves in what we're doing. There's a beautiful story of Mother Teresa. She was once asked by a journalist, don't you feel discouraged in all the work that you do? There's so many people that are starving, and so many people need warmth and blankets, and you're only able to help just a few of those people. Don't you feel discouraged? I think the journalist was a little bit cheeky. And Mother Teresa just smiled, and she said, I'm not looking to be successful. I'm looking to be faithful. Faithful to her own higher principles. Faithful to what God was asking of her. And was she successful? I think everybody in the world but that journalist would say she was. Because she inspired so many other people to do likewise. And that's because she came from her own center. She didn't this is where God is found. This is where Paramahansa Yogananda said the spine is, the astral spine, where the energy, when we withdraw it and turn it towards spirit, he said that's where God's favorite haunt is. And she never left her inner heart, and she just stayed with God. And of course, God says that we should work from the inside out. It's such a beautiful, or that's what actually Paramahansa Yogananda said, just being in touch with God and then expressing it outwardly. Paramahansa Yogananda also said that we should be like a tractor, where we just are steady, and we may have an uphill to go up, a downhill to go up, but if we're just steady, and we don't get caught in our emotions in terms of success, loss, or gain, then we can be steady like that tractor. There's, in our reading today, it's seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. And I read a beautiful story of John the Romanian. And he is a Catholic father, monk, and he's a breatharian. And he was found wandering through the forest, that's where he lived, and by a monk, and he appeared to the monk and asked him some questions, gave him some spiritual counsel about his life. This John the Romanian lived until the 1950s, so it was recent. And then he asked the father that he met, John asked the father to bring him a packet of papers and some ink. And he said, well, what will you use them for? And he said, well, I can just make pens from the tree, the pine tree. And they said, well, can I bring you food and that and anything, dried bread? And he said, oh, no, I just live by the divine mana, the cosmic energy. And he says, sometimes I come to your services, but no one sees me at the local church or the monastery. He says, no one sees me, because essentially he was saying he was invisible. And he had everything. This brother tried to give him something just out of reverence, and he said, I don't need anything. And eventually, this is what happens to all of us, is that we don't need anything anymore on the material plane because we've transcended that. In the Bible, it says that we have dominion over all the earth and the sky, the birds. And at first, when I was in my 20s, my major at university was how to find God in nature. I thought that was Christianity was an ecological religion because of that statement. But I realized that it was saying, no, you need to aspire higher. The more that you are in God, the more that you transcend every lower plane of existence, and you're free of the burden of that lower plane, and that you more and more you're identifying yourself as a child of Spirit and really living in that bliss. I met a young man named Ocean, and his father was named John Robbins. And many of you people may know of him. He was of the Baskin-Robbins sort of fortune family. He grew up, John did, and with an ice cream-shaped swimming pool. And he had his whole life laid out before him in terms of success and money and everything. But it didn't mean anything to him. And so he wrote about just a healthy diet for America and just a lot of really beautiful causes he worked with. And he had family responsibilities, and he took care of this mentally ill relative. And in the recent economic collapse, all his money was gone. There was somebody that was running a big Ponzi scheme in New York, and the financial advisor that he was working with had invested all his money there, and he lost 98% of his assets, and something that all his family was going to depend on for the future. And he was devastated. He was a wonderful soul, but still it was very traumatic to have that happen because he really cared for his family and wanted to see them set for the future. And his wife came to him and said, look what you've done with your life. All the books that you've written, all the people that you've helped. And just think if you would have grown up and become an executive in the Baskin-Robbins company and this thing had happened, what would you have? You'd have nothing. But you have your integrity. You have the whole quality of your life still with you. And isn't this what happens at the end of life? It's going to happen to all of us. We may not lose that ice cream-shaped swimming pool, but we're going to lose everything that we've earned outwardly, all the things that we've done. It's all going to be taken away. And what's going to be left? Just the quality of our energy, the quality of our love for God, and how much we feel that and have shared the love of God with each other. Bless you all.